He agreed to one last blind date, just to shut his friend up, until the girl arrived and looked at him like she wasn't meeting a king, but a man hiding behind his own empire. Every word she spoke peeled him open, forcing him to confront the past he'd buried under power. But when she said the one question no one dared ask him, he knew. Walking away from her might be more dangerous than keeping her close. Maverick Justin, the man criminals feared and politicians appeased, had never believed in softness. Humanity was a luxury men like him couldn't afford. In his world, affection was a weakness and trust was a death sentence. For years, every woman who crossed his path wanted the same thing: protection, status, the thrill of brushing up against danger. None had ever wanted the man beneath the empire, beneath the ink and the cold silence. Lorenzo, his consigliere and oldest friend, insisted he wasn't as unreachable as he pretended. Maverick disagreed. This final blind date was nothing but a courtesy to silence Lorenzo's persistent nagging. He wasn't expecting anything. No connection, no spark, no truth. But the moment the restaurant doors opened, something in the air shifted. A woman stepped inside, rain-softened curls falling against a striking yellow dress that clung to her like sunlight. She scanned the room, not nervously, not excitedly, but with calm curiosity, as though she wasn't walking into the presence of the most dangerous man in the city. As though she had nothing to fear. Maverick felt his jaw tighten. Interest was not something he allowed himself. Yet he felt it anyway, low and unwelcome. Before she even reached his table, he knew it. This blind date would not be like the others. And the story began long before she sat down. Long before she learned the name he carried in the streets. This story began with a man who had forgotten what it meant to be human, and a woman who saw that truth the moment she looked at him. If you've ever carried a silent weight the world can't see, you're not alone here. Stay with us. Hit the subscribe button. This story is for you. Maverick Justin sat alone at his reserved corner table, the chandelier's warm glow reflecting off the navy blue suit that hugged his frame. His tattoos peeked from his collar, dark lines against pale skin, reminders of a life written in blood and loyalty. His fingers drummed once on the table before stilling entirely. He hated waiting. He hated blind dates even more. Lorenzo was going to pay for this. He checked the time. She had 3 more minutes before he walked out. He wasn't here for connection or romance. He was here to make his friend shut up about balance and humanity and not dying alone. Maverick had learned to live without softness. He preferred the chill of distance over the burn of betrayal. He was halfway through the thought when the door opened again. Emanuela DeLuca stepped in with the kind of grace people didn't fake. Her yellow dress flowed around her, sunlight against the restaurant's gold and ivory tones. She held a modest bag in one hand and rain on her skin. Her eyes met his across the room, steady, observant, not intimidated, not fascinated, just aware. She walked toward him, each step unhurried, each breath measured. Maverick found himself sitting straighter, studying her the way he studied threats, but she didn't move like a threat. Or prey. She moved like someone who had nothing to prove. When she reached the table, she offered a small smile. Maverick Justin? Her voice was soft, but not shy. Not unsure. That's me, he said, rising slightly out of courtesy he didn't usually bother with. You must be Emma. Guilty. She eased into the seat opposite him. Thank you for not leaving before I arrived. He almost smirked. Almost. I considered it. I figured. She didn't flinch, didn't apologize, didn't giggle. She looked around the lavish restaurant before returning her gaze to him. This place feels like a stage. Maverick's eyes narrowed. A stage. You know, she said with a shrug, where people come to play roles. Pretend everything is perfect. Pretend they're perfect. He wasn't used to anyone calling out the truth this quickly. Or this simply. You don't like it? He asked. I like real things, she said. Real conversations. Real people. This place feels expensive. Then she met his gaze again. And a little lonely. Maverick felt something shift in his chest. Not much. Just enough to irritate him. So why agree to meet me here? He asked. Because a friend begged me to go, she said honestly. And because I'm trying not to say no to opportunities before I see them. He studied her. Most women on blind dates with him were either trembling or performing. She was doing neither. And what opportunity do you think this is? He asked. I don't know yet, she replied. You haven't spoken enough. His brow lifted. You're direct. I'm a photojournalist. I spend a lot of time listening to people who lie to themselves. Directness is survival. The corner of his mouth twitched. You're not what I expected. Good, she said, sipping water. Expectations are prisons. The waiter approached, visibly nervous. Maverick waved him away without looking. When he turned back, Emma was watching him, not with fear, not with awe, but with curiosity. May I ask you something? She said. No promises. Why did you agree to this date? It doesn't seem like your environment. Maverick leaned back, fingers brushing the tattoo at his throat. Because I told my friend it would be the last time anyone arranged something like this, he said. One more. Then never again. Emma nodded slowly. So I'm your last attempt. Yes. And you already decided how it will end? I usually do. She held his gaze for several seconds. Then she said something no one had ever dared to ask him on a first meeting. Do you always choose loneliness before giving someone a chance to surprise you? He didn't respond. He couldn't. Not immediately. Because for the first time in a long time, someone wasn't afraid to challenge him. The air between them shifted. Quiet, electric, dangerous in a way bullets could never be. Their story started here, in a room filled with gold and shadows, with a woman who refused to be impressed and a man who'd forgotten how to be anything but cold. And this was only the beginning. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The soft glow of the chandeliers cast shifting patterns across the tablecloth, catching the angles of Maverick's jaw and the calm curve of Emma's expression. She didn't look intimidated. She didn't look captivated. She looked present. And that was far more dangerous. She crossed her legs beneath the table, smooth and unhurried, her yellow dress folding like sunlight around her. Her hand rested lightly on her purse, not clutching it, not fidgeting, simply there. Everything about her was deliberate without being performed. You're still staring, she said quietly. Maverick didn't blink. I'm assessing. That's fine. She tilted her head. I'm observing. His brow lifted. There's a difference. Yes, she said, leaning in just slightly. Assessment is what you do to opponents and threats. Observation is what you do to understand. He wasn't sure if she knew the weight of what she'd just said. He wasn't sure if she meant it. He only knew no one had ever sat across from him with such steady eyes. "Is that what you're doing?" he asked. "Trying to understand me?" "Trying to see you," she corrected. "That's different." He hated how her words found the cracks he thought he had sealed shut. To shake it, he leaned back, letting the coldness settle over his features. His tattoos peeked from his open collar, swirling like smoke around steel. He lowered his voice, letting it carry the weight that had made grown men tremble. "Most people don't look this directly at me." "Most people," Emma said softly, "see what they want to see. A myth. A warning. A rumor with a pulse." She tapped her fingernail on the rim of her water glass. "But that's their choice, not yours." He studied her. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't flattering him. And she wasn't flirting, either. She was engaging him like a puzzle she intended to open at her own pace. "Do you know who I am?" he asked finally. "I know the name you gave the reservation," she replied. "And I know the energy you walked in with." "The energy." Yes. Her eyes didn't waver. A man who's used to controlling the room but not used to someone matching his gaze. He felt something almost laughable rise in his chest. Off balance. Him. Maverick Justin. He shifted his weight, letting the intimidation sharpen naturally. "Most people aren't foolish enough to look for truth in a man like me." "Most people aren't me," she said. He waited for the punchline. It didn't come. Instead, she looked around the restaurant again, taking in the ornate decor, the polished marble floors, the chandeliers dripping light like molten gold. "This place," she murmured, "feels like a performance hall." His eyebrows tightened. "You said that earlier." "Because it's true." She gestured gently with her hand. "Look around. Everyone is pretending. They're playing scripts, trying to look richer, happier, more important than they are." She met his eyes again. "Even you." Maverick felt the comment like a slap. Not painful, but surprising. She didn't know him. She didn't know the world that bent under his orders. She didn't know the bodies buried under his silence. And yet she had already sliced straight to the heart of the one thing he guarded most fiercely. The truth of himself. "And what script," he asked carefully, "do you think I'm performing?" "The untouchable man," she said. "The one who feels nothing. The one who wants nothing." Her voice lowered, softer than he expected. The one who stopped believing anyone could truly see him. He held still. Too still. Then he smirked, not warmly, but with that sharp edge he used to regain control. The persona slipped over him like a frost coat. "You're observant," he said. "But you're wrong. I expected you to say that." The waiter returned with menus. Maverick waved him off again, sharper this time. The waiter hurried away. Emma watched him, unruffled. You push people away before they have the chance to misunderstand you. "You think you understand me?" "No," she said. "But I can see that you're tired." His jaw flexed. "I'm not tired." "You are," she insisted gently. "Not the, I worked too much this week, tired. The kind that settles in your bones." The kind you don't sleep off. He fell silent. Not because she was wrong, but because she was dangerously, unervingly right. He couldn't let her have that power. So he shifted again into coldness, the persona he perfected over years of necessity. You analyze strangers often, he asked. Only when they try too hard to look unreadable. Her eyes warmed with something unexpectedly kind. People who are truly indifferent don't need armor. He clenched his fist under the table. He hated how easily she read him. He hated how much he didn't want her to stop. So why are you here? He asked, trying to reroute the conversation. You said this wasn't something you were excited about. That's because I wasn't. She folded her hands on the table. A friend set this up. She said you were complicated. Maverick chuckled darkly. That's one word for it. Not a bad thing, Emma said. Just different. Different, he repeated, his voice flat. Yes. She leaned back. Truthfully, I came here expecting nothing. No sparks, no story, no miracle. I just didn't want to say no before giving the experience a chance. And what are your impressions now? I think, she paused, studying the planes of his face, the quiet tension in his shoulders. I think you're not as cold as you want me to believe. He nearly laughed. Trust me, Emma, you don't know me well enough to say that. No, she said, but I know enough to understand that the coldest people are usually the ones who were warmest once. His breath hitched. Barely, but she caught it. He wanted to look away. He didn't. Their dynamic shifted then, a subtle tension sparking between them like a match glancing off stone, a flicker, small and combustible. Tell me something, she said. Something real. Maverick's eyes narrowed. Why? Because this can't be a performance, she replied. Not for me. If we're going to sit here pretending we're not both evaluating each other, then we might as well be honest. Honesty. A foreign language he rarely used. He exhaled. Slow. Steady. What do you want to know? She tilted her head. Why does someone like you agree to a blind date? You don't give off looking for love energy. I'm not, he said. And I didn't. She blinked. Then why come? Because my friend insisted. Because he wouldn't let it go. And because I told him this would be the last time I entertained something like this. Last time, she murmured. As in final. You decided that before meeting me. Yes. Why? Because I don't believe there's anyone out there for someone like me. Her expression softened. Too much. That sounds lonely. It's not, he said. It is, she countered softly, but it doesn't have to be. Her sincerity, quiet, unforced, slipped under his defenses like sunlight bleeding through a shutter. He looked away for the first time. Not because he was intimidated, but because he didn't know what to do with the warmth her words ignited. You're fearless, he muttered. No, she said gently. I just don't run from shadows I didn't create. He turned back to her, something new stirring in his chest. Emma, he said quietly, you don't know what shadows follow me, and you don't know what light I carry. The air thickened between them, charged and fragile. Oil and fire. Opposites that could either ignite or destroy. The waiter hesitated at a distance, sensing tension but not understanding it. Maverick ignored him. Emma didn't even notice him. Only they existed at the table. "You're different," Maverick said, the admission pulled out of him. "So are you," Emma replied. Not fearful, not impressed, not eager, just present. And for the first time in a very long time, Maverick didn't know if that terrified him, or if he wanted more of it. Their instincts clashed, their energies colliding. Two forces that shouldn't fit, yet somehow aligned. Oil meeting fire. Cold meeting sunlight. A man who had forgotten how to feel. And a woman who felt everything. And in that quiet, electric moment, their story truly began. The air between them felt different now. Charged, almost fragile, as though a single wrong word would shatter the moment stretching between them. Maverick wasn't used to silence feeling heavy. In his world, silence meant danger. But this felt like exposure. Like she was peeling back layers he didn't remember showing. Emma rested her elbows lightly on the table, fingers intertwined, expression steady. "So," she said, "shall we talk for real now?" He raised an eyebrow. "I thought we were." "No," she said. "You were performing. You're very good at it. But I want to talk to the person behind all that." "Behind what?" She gestured vaguely to him. "The cold stare. The smooth answers. The deflection every time I get close." Maverick sat back, allowing the shadow of a smirk. "You think you're close? I think I'm closer than most." He hated how right she was. He folded his hands, studying her openly now. No need to be subtle. She had seen past too much already for him to pretend indifference. "Fine," he said. "Ask your questions." Her smile was small and real. "All right. First one. What's the last thing that genuinely made you laugh?" He blinked. Hard. Of all the questions he braced for, work, family, trauma, that one wasn't on the list. "I don't laugh much," he said. "I didn't ask how often. I asked when." His jaw tightened. "Years ago." "Why'd you stop?" "Life," he said curtly. "Life doesn't stop you from laughing," she replied softly. "Pain does." His fingers twitched. She didn't let him escape the moment. "Next question. Who do you trust?" "Trust isn't something I discuss." "Because you don't trust anyone," she said. He lifted his gaze sharply. "You're making a lot of assumptions." She shook her head. "Observations." He leaned forward, letting his voice drop. "You don't know me well enough to observe anything accurately." "But I do," she said quietly. "I know you walk into rooms expecting betrayal before connection. I know your first instinct is to scan for exits. And I know you pay attention to who watches you, not because you crave attention, but because you fear intentions." Maverick's heartbeat stumbled. Most people feared him. She saw him. "That's enough," he said, voice edged with danger. Emma didn't flinch. "If that's really enough, you'd have already stood up and walked out." And damn it, she was right again. He exhaled long and low, letting the tension unwind just enough to keep the conversation from snapping entirely. "You're invasive," he muttered. "You're evasive," she countered. His lips twitched. "Fair." The waiter approached cautiously. Emma ordered pasta. Maverick didn't order anything. "You're not eating," she asked. No. Why not? Not hungry. Or, you don't like eating around strangers? He looked up sharply. She held his gaze, unshaken. How do you know that? He asked. You keep your hands under the table. Only people who grew up in unpredictable environments do that. His breath froze in his throat. You think you've figured out my entire life? No, she said. But I know trauma when I see it. He swallowed once, an involuntary motion he hated. To reroute the conversation, he asked, What about you? What do you do besides read people you just met? I'm a freelance photojournalist. Of course you are, he muttered. She smiled. Why of course? He gestured at her with his chin. You look like someone who goes looking for truth. Even when truth is dangerous. Truth is always dangerous, she said. But ignoring it is worse. He wanted to disagree. He didn't. What do you photograph? He asked. Her fingers brushed her water glass. People. Forgotten places. Neighborhoods everyone pretends not to see. Lives most don't care about. He stiffened. Why? Because someone should. Doesn't sound safe. It's not. And you do it anyway? Yes. Why? She met his eyes. Because walking away from the broken doesn't make you whole. Maverick held still, breathing quietly through the ache he didn't want to name. Her compassion wasn't naive, it was deliberate. Sharp. A weapon in its own way. Show me one of your photos, he said before thinking. She considered him, then pulled her phone from her bag. She scrolled through image after image. Dim alleys painted with grief, children smiling despite hunger, elderly men guarding makeshift shelters, women working double shifts to survive. Her world wasn't glamorous. It wasn't filtered or staged. It was real. It was everything he had built walls to avoid. This one, she said, stopping on a photo of a boy staring through cracked window glass. This one still haunts me. Maverick stared at it longer than intended. Something in the boy's eyes, the loneliness, the worn defiance, felt too familiar. He exhaled silently. He looks trapped. He is, she said. But not by the glass. Then by what? By the life he was born into. His throat tightened. Some of us don't get choices. Some of us fight for them anyway. He looked at her. Not the picture, not the phone, her. A woman with a soft voice and a steel spine. Someone who ran toward brokenness instead of away. Someone who made him feel seen, exposed, uncomfortably alive. And he hated it. How long have you been doing this? He asked. 7 years. Why start? Her gaze dropped. A shadow crossed her features. Because someone once told me my compassion was too big. Too much. Inconvenient. Her fingers tightened around her phone. People love the idea of what I represent. Kindness, hope, softness. But they don't love the reality. I'm opinionated. I'm stubborn. I get angry. I get exhausted. And I break down like everyone else. He watched her quietly. They want the fantasy, she whispered, not the person. Something inside him shifted again, subtle but seismic. Because no matter how different they seemed, her words mirrored his own life. People want the legend, he said softly, surprising himself. Not the man. Her eyes met his, startled. And in that glance, quick, raw, unguarded, something passed between them. Recognition. Understanding. Loneliness meeting loneliness and realizing it wasn't alone. That, Emma whispered, is the first real thing you've said tonight. He didn't respond. He didn't need to, because they both felt it. The crack in his armor. A hairline fracture. Small. Dangerous. A beginning. The waiter arrived with her food. She thanked him warmly. Maverick barely noticed. His thoughts were tangled in threads he had avoided for years. Emma took a small bite, then looked up. You're quieter now. You talk a lot, he said. You listen a lot, she countered. He paused. That's new. Listening. No, he looked down at the table, then up into her eyes. Being interested. Her breath caught. Not visibly. Not dramatically. Just enough for him to notice. The rest of the meal unfolded with an unspoken tension threading between them. He asked her more questions, real ones, not because he wanted information, but because he wanted her truth. She answered them without fear. And with each answer, another crack formed in the ice around his chest. When the plates were cleared and the night grew quieter, Emma placed her napkin down and stood. Maverick frowned. You're leaving. It's late. He rose halfway without meaning to. She smiled. Soft. Unexpected. Relax. I'm not running away from you. Most people do. I'm not most people. He stood fully now. I didn't say the night was over. I know, she said gently. But you need time. To think. To breathe. She studied him for a moment longer. And to decide whether you're speaking to me, or the mask you've worn for years. He didn't move. She adjusted the strap of her bag, brushed a loose curl behind her ear, and took one step back. Good night, Maverick. Her voice was calm, warm, real. Before he could decide whether to say something, she turned and walked away, slow, graceful, unapologetically herself. And for the first time in a long, long time, he didn't retreat. He watched her leave. Not with cold detachment, but with the unsettling ache of wanting her to stay. When the doors closed behind her, the restaurant felt too big, too silent, too empty. A crack in the armor. A spark in the darkness. A beginning neither of them expected. And for Maverick Justin, it was the most dangerous part of all. He stood there long after Emma was gone, the quiet hum of the restaurant fading into something distant and hollow. Something in him felt unsettled, restless in a way he couldn't name. He should have left. He should have pulled out his phone, called Lorenzo, ended the night, and buried everything back under the steel walls he knew so well. But he found himself walking toward the exit instead. Outside, rain poured in sheets, the kind that drowned sound and blurred headlights into streaks of gold. And there she was, Emma, standing under the small overhang by the door, her yellow dress dimming into warm amber under the streetlights. Her hair was damp at the ends, clinging to her cheeks. She wasn't rushing toward a taxi or fumbling for an umbrella. She was waiting. For him. She turned as he stepped beside her. I wondered if you'd actually come out. He slipped his hands into his pockets, the cold rain misting onto his suit. Why wouldn't I? You looked like a man fighting himself, she said lightly. I usually win. A small smile played on her lips. Maybe losing wouldn't be so bad. His chest tightened strangely. Where are you going? Home, she said, but there was a glimmer in her eyes. But I walk when I can. Helps me think. In this weather? It's just water, she shrugged. He almost laughed at that. Almost. They stood there a moment longer as the storm thickened, wind brushing rain onto their faces. Walk with me, she said softly. He shouldn't have. He knew that. But something inside him, rebellious, curious, alive, shifted. Fine, he said. And together, they stepped out into the night. The rain soaked his suit within seconds, but Emma didn't seem bothered. She held her arms slightly out, palms open, like the water belonged to her. Maverick walked beside her, hands in pockets, gaze sharp as always, but for once, not scanning for shadows. Just watching her. You're quiet, she said. I'm thinking. Dangerous. Often. She laughed, a warm, low sound that didn't match the cold night. You're impossible to read. So are you, he replied. She pointed to a narrow side street. This way. This isn't the route to the main road, he observed. I'm not taking you to another expensive place, she said. You had enough of that for one night. Where are we going? A cafe. My spot. Where I work. He hesitated. Are you sure? If I wasn't, I wouldn't have invited you. She brushed wet hair from her face. You don't scare me, Maverick. His steps slowed. You should. She stopped too, turning to look at him fully. Rain dripped down her cheeks like tears that didn't belong to sadness. If I feared you, she said, I wouldn't be walking with you. Fear freezes people. You intrigue me. He had no response to that. None that wouldn't reveal too much. So he followed her. The cafe looked like it had lived 100 lives. The sign above the door flickered slightly, the paint chipping at the corners. Inside, warm golden lights softened the edges of the worn wooden floors. Old books lined the walls. Mismatched chairs. Faded art prints. A place built not for luxury but for comfort. It was the opposite of his world. And for some reason, stepping inside made him inhale deeply, as if the air here was different. Emma walked behind the counter with ease, nodding at the sleepy barista who barely looked up. We're closing in 30, but you're good, the barista murmured. Emma motioned Maverick to follow her to a small table near the back, a table cluttered with photo prints, old notebooks, and a laptop covered with stickers. She wiped the seat with a cloth. Sorry, it's messy. I wasn't expecting company tonight. It's fine. He pulled out the chair but didn't sit yet. He scanned the room, absorbing details. You work here often? Almost every night. She sat. This place knows me better than most people. He finally sat across from her, the small table shrinking the space between them. She reached into her bag and took out a stack of photos, spreading them gently. These are the stories I collect, she said. He leaned forward. The first photo showed a woman pushing a shopping cart full of bottles toward a shelter. Another showed an abandoned playground, rusted swings dangling like forgotten limbs. Children sharing one umbrella. A young man asleep on a bench. A father stitching his daughter's torn school bag by hand. "These are the faces no one wants to see," she said. "But I can't look away." He scanned them one by one. "This is why you walk in the rain?" he asked quietly. "Yes." She pointed to a photo of a little girl sitting alone on a curb, hugging her knees. "The world is loud, but places like this, the quiet suffering, those are the ones that haunt me." "And you choose this," he murmured. "No," she said softly. "It chooses me." Something in that statement burrowed under his ribs. She picked up another photograph, hesitating. "There's one more." She slid it toward him. A boy, no older than 8, staring through cracked glass with a defiant loneliness in his eyes. A dirty windowpane between him and the world. The background blurred, but the expression, raw resilience, was painfully clear. Maverick felt his chest lock. His fingers curled around the edge of the table. "Where was this taken?" "In one of the poorest blocks downtown," she said. He never spoke, but he watched everything, and he looked at me like he had already lived too much. The room felt colder suddenly. Or maybe it was him. "He looks familiar," she said softly. "Not physically, but the emotion. That hardness. That loneliness. Like he grew up building walls instead of dreams." He swallowed. Hard. "Why show me this one?" "Because," she said quietly, "it reminds me of you." For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The resemblance wasn't physical. It was the eyes. The silent torment. The unspoken plea to be left alone, and to be saved. Both at once. He forced himself to speak. "You think I'm like him?" "I think," she said gently, "you were him once. Before the world taught you to wear armor." He sat back, jaw tense, every muscle alert as if she had struck him. But she hadn't attacked him. She'd uncovered him. No one had ever done that. No one had ever even tried. The rain outside softened into a rhythmic patter. The cafe lights dimmed slightly as closing time approached. The whole space felt smaller, quieter, as if the world had narrowed to nothing but the table between them. "Maverick," she said, leaning closer, "when was the last time you saw the world outside your power?" He froze. "Outside the fear you command? Outside the control? Outside the empire?" He stared at the photograph. "Years," he whispered. "Why?" He shook his head. "Because my world doesn't allow softness." "Then maybe your world needs to change." He lifted his eyes to hers, and in her gaze, steady, warm, fearless, he felt something he had forgotten. The ache of wanting more. Not power. Not respect. Not obedience. Something human. She reached out then, slow, gentle, her hand hovering before touching his lightly. He stiffened. Her fingers brushed his knuckles, the softest contact, but it hit him like a strike to the chest. His instinct was to pull away, to recoil into the familiar steel of control. But he didn't. He let her. Her hand was warm, steady, real. A connection so simple, so ordinary, but for him, it was seismic. "You don't have to be cold with me," she whispered. He breathed out, long and unsteady. "I don't know how to be anything else." "Then we learn," she said. "Together." He didn't respond with words. He couldn't. but he flipped his hand, just enough, so her fingers slid into his. A choice. A beginning. The smallest crack widening into something dangerous and alive. Outside, the rain eased. Inside, the silence shifted into something softer. And for the first time in a lifetime, Maverick Justin didn't feel like a king. He felt like a man. The city felt heavier that night. Rain streaked the streets like smudges of oil on glass, and Maverick sat in his penthouse, staring at the dim glow of his phone. He had just hung up with Lorenzo, still shaken by the conversation that had been replaying in his mind since the cafe. "She didn't want anything from me," he muttered aloud, his voice barely carrying over the hum of the city below. It wasn't just the words themselves, but the weight behind them, the refusal of all the things he usually offered, all the gestures he assumed were necessary. No protection, no gifts, no strings attached. Just her. He ran a hand through his hair, restless. It was disorienting to meet someone like Emma, someone who didn't seem impressed by the wealth, the status, or the reputation he had built meticulously over years. And that, more than anything, unnerved him. The next morning, Maverick couldn't shake the image of her in the small cafe, her fingers brushing over the edges of a photograph as if it were fragile glass. He had tried to convince himself to step back, to respect the boundaries she had drawn. But the thought of her working so tirelessly for the communities she photographed, and yet struggling silently, sparked something in him. He couldn't leave it alone. By evening, he was making discreet calls, tracing channels and programs that worked quietly behind the scenes. Feeding schools, repairing community centers, providing food and health care. And quietly, anonymously, he began funneling resources into them. Emma, meanwhile, continued her daily rounds with her camera. She noticed changes first in the obvious ways: the small clinic with new supplies, the park with fresh benches, the children with proper school uniforms. She shared a smile with the locals who had begun to recognize her presence and thanked her for bringing attention to their struggles. "What's going on?" she asked one of the community coordinators one morning, tilting her head as she adjusted the lens on her camera. "These improvements, they just happened?" The coordinator shrugged, smiling. "Some anonymous donors. Someone who cares, I suppose." Emma didn't think much of it at first. She liked the mystery. She liked the idea that someone, somewhere, had taken notice. She didn't need to know the face behind it. But Maverick, he was watching her from the sidelines in ways she couldn't see. And each time she smiled at a child in one of his funded programs, it chipped away at the walls he had built around himself. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly. Their encounters became more frequent. Planned or accidental, it didn't matter. She would bump into him at the small cafe, or he would pass by her exhibition showing at a local gallery, a quiet smile acknowledging her work. They began to talk more, lingering in conversations that didn't need to be about anything important. Yet, for all the growing closeness, the tension simmered beneath the surface. Maverick, conditioned to control every circumstance, struggled against the pull of Emma's independence. He found himself irritated when she brushed off his advice, defensive when she ignored his subtle offers of help, and cold when she challenged him outright. "Why do you keep trying to control everything?" Emma asked one evening, her arms crossed, eyes sharp and unyielding, as if daring him to flinch. Maverick's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to reply, then closed it again. He wanted to tell her he was only trying to protect her. He wanted to tell her he knew the dangers that lurked in the shadows she so fearlessly stepped into. But she would not hear that explanation. Not now, not ever. And more than that, he realized, he could not tell her that the truth was also about him, about the corners of his heart she was quietly dismantling. "I'm not trying to control you," he said finally, voice low, rough around the edges. I worry. That's all." "Worry doesn't give you the right," she shot back, a small spark of frustration flickering in her eyes. "And if you really cared, you'd respect me enough to step back sometimes." It was one of those rare moments where Maverick felt the weight of his own flaws reflected so clearly. He almost pushed her away that night, almost let pride and fear dictate the distance between them. But something deeper held him, something unspoken and fragile, that tethered him to her presence. As days turned into weeks, their bond grew, careful and cautious. Maverick found himself lingering in moments he once would have ignored, savoring the sound of her laugh, the tilt of her head when she explained the story behind a photograph. Emma began to notice his presence more, too, noticing how he stepped aside when she needed space, how he smiled from a distance when she succeeded, and occasionally, the fleeting softness in his eyes when he thought no one was looking. And yet, they were both acutely aware of the boundaries they were testing. There were moments when Maverick's temper flared, when he almost retreated behind the walls of control that had defined him for years. There were moments when Emma's independence and unwillingness to rely on him directly almost drove him away, because he could not accept the fear of loss that came with attachment. One rainy afternoon, they found themselves walking side by side along the wet streets, boots splashing lightly in the puddles. The cafe was closed for renovations, so Emma suggested a detour through a nearby market. They weaved through stalls of colorful textiles and fresh produce, the scent of rain and wet earth mixing with the aroma of fried street food. Maverick watched her, fascinated by the way she seemed to belong here, immersed in the lives of people whose worlds were so different from his. "You make it all seem lighter," he said quietly. Emma glanced at him, her expression half amused, half curious. "Do I?" "You do," he insisted, more forcefully this time. "Even the things that are heavy, things I would normally overlook, you make me see differently." She laughed softly, brushing rain from her hair. "You mean I make you notice people aren't just problems to solve?" "Yes," he admitted, smiling reluctantly. "Exactly that." A silence fell between them, comfortable yet charged, the kind that carries the weight of unspoken feelings. For the first time, Maverick realized he didn't want to define what this was. Not yet. Not when the fragile threads between them felt as though they could unravel at any careless movement. And Emma, in her quiet way, felt the same. She didn't need a label or a promise. She only knew that when he was near, the world felt wider, and her purpose somehow lighter. It was dangerous, of course. For Maverick, danger wasn't just a word, it was a reflex. The life he led demanded caution and distance. But with Emma, those instincts were muted, overridden by a curiosity he had never indulged before, a willingness to risk the unknown. They parted that evening at the corner of the market, the rain easing to a drizzle. Maverick lingered for a moment, watching her disappear into the crowd. The pull he felt was unrelenting, a slow ache that refused to be named. "She's different," he whispered to himself, "and I can't stay away." Somewhere deep down, he knew that the dangerous what-if had begun, the one that could consume him entirely if he let it. And yet, He couldn't help but wonder if it was worth it. Because for the first time in a long time, Maverick wasn't thinking about power, or control, or wealth. He was thinking about Emma. And that thought alone was enough to change everything. The city had darkened in more ways than just the sky. Violence had begun to stir in corners Maverick thought he had long sealed off. Rival syndicates were testing him. Raids, whispered threats, subtle sabotage, and the tension wound tighter around him with every passing day. He kept it all hidden from Emma. Every time she called or came by, he forced a smile, carried her through the streets with the same careful attentiveness he had cultivated before she mattered. But underneath, the world he navigated was brutal. Contracts broken, men disappearing, lives discarded like worn clothing. He couldn't let her see it. Not her. Not the chaos, the blood. The monster he feared lurked inside him. Still, Emma noticed. She noticed the twitch in his jaw, the way his eyes darkened when a phone rang unexpectedly, the restless energy in his hands. She didn't press. She never asked for details, only truth, as if she could sense that he was living a lie. "Maverick," she said softly one evening as they sat on the steps outside her apartment. Rain had started again, light this time, misting the pavement. "Something's wrong. You don't have to tell me everything. Just be honest about what you are with me." He looked away, swallowing the words that would betray everything he had fought to hide. "I'm fine," he lied, the tone sharper than he intended. "Don't lie to me," she said, her gaze steady. "I can handle more than you think. But I won't handle deception." The words lodged in his chest like a knife. He wanted to tell her the truth, that darkness was a part of him, a shadow she could never walk in without being cut. But fear, raw and suffocating, took over. What if she saw him for what he really was and recoiled? What if she looked at him and found only a monster? "I said I'm fine," he snapped suddenly, the words harsher than the rain around them, sharp and jagged. His hands clenched at his sides, trembling despite himself. "I don't owe you explanations." Emma flinched, hurt flashing across her face. She stepped back, shaking her head slowly. "I won't love a mask," she said quietly, each word deliberate. "If you can't be real with me, leave me out of your world." And with that, she walked away, her silhouette disappearing into the misty streets. The echo of her footsteps lingered longer than any gunshot he had ever heard, cutting through him with a precision that left him reeling. Maverick stood there, drenched in rain, chest tight, stomach hollow. The cold armor he had wrapped around himself snapped back into place instinctively, the persona of the untouchable, impenetrable man returning with a ruthless efficiency. He went home, slammed doors, and berated himself for weakness. But even in the solitude of his penthouse, surrounded by wealth and security, the pain of seeing her leave burned hotter than any threat from his enemies. 4 days, he moved through the motions. Meetings with syndicate contacts, surveillance of his rivals, controlling the chaos he knew would spill if he faltered. All the while, he felt the absence of Emma like a wound that refused to close. The monster he feared she'd see, the ruthless, cold, calculating Maverick, was exactly what she had glimpsed. And unlike bullets or bloodshed, this wound had no cure, no camouflage. Seeing her walk away had pierced deeper than any rival's attack, a truth he wasn't ready to face but could not escape. Even in the quiet moments, her words haunted him. "I won't love a mask." For the first time, he wondered if he could survive her absence, and whether the monster he had tried to bury inside himself could ever allow him to reclaim what he had lost. The invitation came quietly, almost cautiously, like the man who extended it. Maverick had never let anyone cross the threshold of his private world. Not the penthouse everyone saw, not the public facade he maintained. But tonight, he asked Emma to enter the mansion he called his own. The real one. The one where shadows moved along polished floors and walls bore witness to decisions made in darkness. She hesitated only a moment at the gates, studying him as he stood beside the sleek black car. His face was taut, unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something raw, that made her step forward. Inside, the mansion was a maze of hidden corridors, rooms filled with art and artifacts collected from across the world. And yet, there were spaces that spoke of blood and power, a study with weapons neatly displayed, a library with files that weren't meant for public eyes, a safe with locks that whispered secrets. Emma noticed, but she didn't run. Instead, she followed him through the labyrinth of his life, her presence a quiet affirmation that she was willing to see, and perhaps to understand. Finally, they settled in a room that overlooked the city, rain tracing silver lines against the glass. The silence between them was thick, the weight of unspoken truths pressing down. "Who are you without fear?" she asked softly, her voice breaking the tension but not shattering it. "Without power, without the Mafia King title?" Maverick's body froze. The question struck like a blade through stone, through the carefully constructed walls of his identity. He opened his mouth, then closed it. No words came. His silence, deliberate and complete, was confession enough. He had no answer. There was no Maverick outside the empire he had built, the fear he had commanded, the control he had exerted over every life in his orbit. Without it, he was nothing. Emma reached slowly and laid her hand on his. He flinched at the contact, flinched at the intimacy, at the vulnerability, at the raw truth that had no shield. And then the dam broke. He didn't scream. He didn't shout. But for the first time in decades, he cried. Quietly, silently, along her hand, his tears tracing paths down his cheeks he had never let anyone see. Each drop was a lifetime of pain, of fear, of battles fought and victories hollowly won. Emma didn't speak. She simply stayed, letting him lean into her presence, letting him shed the weight he had carried alone for so long. She had glimpsed the monster, and she had stayed. Now, she held the man he thought no one could ever see. When he finally lifted his head, wiping at his cheeks with trembling hands, he looked at her with something raw, something unmasked. The king, the ruthless strategist, the man who feared nothing and no one, was gone. Only Maverick remained, fragile and human. He began, then stopped, words failing him again. "You don't have to explain," Emma whispered. "I'm not leaving. But if we're going to do this, if we're going to be us, you need to face it. All of it. Every shadow you've hidden." He nodded slowly, the weight of her condition pressing down, but not as heavily as the truth he had just shared. It was a beginning, a fragile, terrifying beginning, but it was the first step toward something neither of them could fully name yet. For the first time, Maverick realized that the only way forward wasn't through control, through power, or through fear. It was through truth. And for the first time, he wanted it. And Emma, sensing the shift, allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. She had stayed. She had not run. And somehow, that was enough to make him believe that maybe, just maybe, the monster could learn to be human again. The mansion felt different now. Not lighter, exactly, but less suffocating. Maverick moved through it with a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with fear or dominance. Operations that had once ruled his every hour were being quietly reduced. He shifted resources toward legitimate fronts, businesses that could stand without intimidation, investments that built instead of destroyed. Even in this recalibration, one constant remained: Emma. He protected her from afar, subtle and unseen, weaving shields around her life in ways she never had to notice. Threats that might have reached her were quietly neutralized. Danger that could have touched her world was diverted by invisible hands. He made certain she never understood how close violence had come. But she noticed the change in her surroundings anyway. The community centers she photographed, the libraries, the clinics, some had become more than just functional spaces. Children laughed freely, streets seemed safer, and hope lingered in the eyes of people who had long forgotten it. Curiosity finally got the better of her. She asked around, gently probing the coordinators and volunteers. Their stories painted a familiar pattern, but one name never surfaced. "I don't know who's behind it," a coordinator admitted. "Some generous donor, very discreet. We just do our best." Emma's chest warmed in a way that surprised her. There was a presence behind it, someone who cared enough to act quietly, someone who wanted change without applause. She didn't need to know the man's name. Or maybe she did, instinctively. Later, over coffee at her favorite cafe, she confronted him, not with accusation, not with anger, but with quiet understanding. "You did this," she said softly, voice low, eyes steady. "All of it. You were kind when no one was watching." Maverick froze, the weight of her words both comforting and terrifying. He had never been thanked for this kind of care, the kind that required no spectacle, no recognition. "I didn't think you'd notice," he admitted, his voice rough with something closer to humility than pride. "I noticed," she said simply, and in that moment, the world outside, the politics, the rivalries, the shadows of his old life, felt a little smaller. She leaned back, a smile touching her lips. "You did good, Maverick. That's enough for me." The simplicity of her gratitude struck him deeper than any praise he had ever commanded. It wasn't about status or power. It wasn't about control. It was about care. Quiet, consistent, human care. Their relationship shifted after that. Love, once unspoken and tentative, began to breathe between them. It was slow burning, grounded, with shared glances and small gestures rather than grand declarations. They walked the city streets together, rain or shine, without guards or pretense. Maverick listened, really listened, in ways he had never practiced before. And Emma, in turn, began to trust him fully, sensing the man beneath the titles and the shadows. Even as he pulled back from violent operations, the world around him still threatened in subtle ways. Rivals tested boundaries, whispered threats in boardrooms and alleys alike. Yet Maverick no longer responded with blind force. He observed, intervened quietly, and prioritized protection over domination. And always, he ensured Emma remained untouched. One evening, as they walked through a park he had helped fund, Emma paused to take photographs of children playing. The sun was low, casting long golden streaks across the playground. "Do you ever think about what life could be like?" she asked, tilting her head at him. Maverick considered her question. For years, he had only thought about survival, power, control, the mechanisms of a life that required ruthlessness to maintain. But now, watching the laughter, the simplicity, the resilience, he realized he wanted more. He wanted a life where fear wasn't the first currency, where love wasn't a liability. "I do," he admitted. "More than I ever thought I could. And I want it. A real life. With you." Emma smiled, quietly radiant, and reached for his hand. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't explosive. It was grounding, real, tethered to something far deeper than either of them had expected. For the first time, Maverick understood that he didn't need to be a weapon to be formidable. Strength wasn't measured in fear or control. It was measured in protection, care, and the courage to face one's own demons while still allowing someone else in. And with Emma by his side, he felt the edges of the monster he once feared she'd see begin to soften. Not gone, not vanished entirely, but humanized, channeled into something that could create, rather than destroy. In her presence, Maverick learned that life could be more than power, that love could be more than a risk, that the man he wanted to be, a man, not a weapon, was within reach. And for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to imagine a future where the sun set not on fear, but on something he could truly call his own. It had been a year since that first accidental meeting in the rain, that first shared coffee in a corner of the city that had since become a quiet sanctuary for them both. Maverick parked his car a block away from the tiny cafe where Emma had first shown him the life outside his empire. He paused for a moment, looking at the familiar facade, rain lightly streaking the glass windows, just as it had that day. No ring. Not yet. He wanted this moment to be theirs, not dictated by tradition, expectation, or the grandeur that so often defined his life. He wanted to design the ring with her, to make it as unique and real as the bond they shared. Inside, Emma was already waiting, smiling as she set her camera beside a cup of coffee. When she saw him, a flicker of the past danced across her eyes, the memory of a man who had walked into her life and quietly changed it. "Mav," she said softly, the nickname just between them, carrying warmth and history. He sat opposite her, taking a breath he hadn't needed in years. "Emma," he began, voice low, "I need to tell you something. Things I've never said to anyone." She leaned in, curious, patient, letting him speak without interruption. "I planned never to date again," he confessed, eyes meeting hers. I thought I was only capable of surviving, not living, not letting anyone in." Her hand brushed his on the table, gentle reassurance. "But you," he continued, voice catching slightly, "you saw me. Not the empire, not the man I thought I had to be. You saw the real me before I even did. You challenged me. You made me believe there was something beyond survival. Something worth fighting for, beyond fear, beyond control." Emma's eyes shimmered, and she squeezed his hand. "You're saying this as a man, not as a king," she said softly, and he nodded. He took a deep breath, letting the vulnerability hang between them. "You changed my life, Emma. Quietly. Completely. You saved me from a life of silent loneliness, without even trying." Emma's throat tightened. She had never shared this, but now, finally, she felt the same confession rise within her. "Maverick." She paused, gathering the courage she had quietly held for herself all these years. "I swore off relationships. I promised myself I wouldn't let anyone in again. Not after everything. But you changed that too. They looked at each other, a year of shared laughter, quiet glances, and subtle intimacies reflected in their eyes. A year of small moments that had built something far greater than either could have imagined. Maverick smiled then, a quiet, unguarded smile that hadn't appeared in decades. We saved each other, he said simply. From the loneliness we didn't even realize we were living in. Emma leaned across the table, placing both hands over his. Then show me, she said. Show me a life beyond fear, beyond walls. Show me what you can be, with me. And in that moment, Maverick knew there was no need for grandeur. No need for spectacle. Love, for once, was enough. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small sketchbook, flipping it open to a blank page. I don't have a ring yet, he admitted, smiling. I want to design it with you. Something that represents us. Our story. Emma's eyes softened, the corners of her mouth lifting into a gentle, knowing smile. Then yes, she said, voice steady, heart certain. Yes. It wasn't about the ring. It wasn't about the title, the empire, or the life he had controlled with an iron fist. It was about them, two people who had saved each other from their own silent wars, two souls who had chosen love in spite of fear, in spite of pain, in spite of the world that had once demanded they remain closed off. They sat together for a long while, hands intertwined, hearts finally aligned. The rain outside had stopped, leaving only the soft glow of streetlights reflecting in puddles on the pavement, a quiet witness to a beginning neither had dared to imagine a year ago. And as they walked out of the cafe into the night, side by side, Maverick realized something he had never thought possible, that life could be full and light and gentle, even for a man like him. And Emma realized the same, that love could arrive quietly, unexpectedly, and transform a lifetime of caution into hope. If you've ever been broken and still chose love, this story is yours too.